What's up, everybody? I am your host, an author that can't hear a damn thing and has no idea how to work a crossbow, and that is my co-host, a serial killer who dresses like a New York graffiti artist. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we talk about another great slasher. But not just any slasher, a Mike Flanagan slasher. And anytime Flanagan is involved, it's probably going to be a damn good movie. Because he is an awesome writer and director, and if you have listened to us for a while now, you will know that we are both really big fans of his.
If you're not a fan of Mike Flanagan, you're obviously fucking deaf and blind.
You probably have a bad credit score.
You probably have like those family members who won't help you out because you just stole everything from them.
Yeah, you borrowed all that money and never paid it back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some horror fan out there somewhere who's like, oh yeah, fuck that guy, but it's got to be like the edgy. I gotta go against the grain. Like everything everybody likes, I gotta say is shit. And then say this awful movie from 1992 is the best thing that's ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, like a $50,000 budget, shot in someone's backyard movie is really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely heard those people before.
I mean, Mike Flanagan, if you don't like his movies and you don't like his shows, because I get, maybe the shows, some people want to be spoon-fed.
Yeah.
He has really intricate stories. But this is like a straight-up movie. This is not like an intricate story. This is much different than a lot of other Mike Flanagan.
Just a slasher, man. Just a slasher. When it comes to Hush, this was a real interesting time. Because, one, Flanagan wasn't the juggernaut director that he is now. Like, he didn't really pop up on a lot of people's radars until he did The Haunting of Hill House. And if you don't know, back then, Netflix was really trying to get into the producing high-quality movies and series game. So one of the things that they did was lock down Flanagan for a 5-series deal, which is how we got like Hill House and Bly Manor and the more recent Fall of the House of Usher. But
Midnight Mass.
The best
one.
But yeah, like that's when Flanagan really got his name out there. But another interesting thing about 2016 was this was when Blumhouse was putting out some bangers, man. Like they weren't the overproducing generic horror film factory that they are now. So it was definitely kind of a little bit of a different time when Hush came out.
Yeah, I think that, do you know when The Haunting of Hill House came out?
It was like, was it 2018?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this movie is what put Mike Flanagan on Netflix's radar. Because this hit in 16, I believe, hit
16,
Netflix. Yeah. And, Mike Flanagan was known for working on, he did Oculus. He did a couple other things.
He did the Ouija movies, yeah.
But I think that this movie, when Netflix ended up picking it up, and it did so well and was so liked. I remember for a long time it was on like Netflix as one of their main page when you flip through. I think that's what really put him on their radar, and probably part of what scored him that 5-series deal.
Yep.
Which is great because I love Mike Flanagan movies, but Mike Flanagan is such a good writer. He needs like a 10-episode series to really tell a good story. And we hadn't seen that side of Mike Flanagan yet until he got that deal. And so, I think 4 out of the 5 of those are fucking fantastic. The Haunting of Bly Manor was kind of slow.
Yeah, it's a little weak.
Yeah, and I think it had so much expectation because Hill House was so fucking good.
Yeah.
But everything else after that were fucking bangers. Like Midnight Mass was my favorite. Was it Midnight Club?
I think it was Midnight Club.
Yeah, that was really good. They brought Heather Langenkamp in on that. That was fucking awesome. And then the Fall of the House of Usher was fucking all of those are super awesome stories that you could never tell in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. It sucks because I've never seen any of those offered for a physical release. And I would love to own At least most of them. I probably wouldn't care about getting Bly Manor, but I would totally get the rest of them.
Yeah, I agree. And hopefully, I don't know what the rights are. I know Netflix owns the rights to some movies, and they never end up coming out. And if you get them, you have to do them the bootleg way.
Yeah.
This movie was a little different because it was made and then Netflix picked it up, which is why I think Scream Factory was able to end up getting the distribution for it. And they just recently released an awesome fucking 4K scanned version of this. I got it. Looks amazing. Those shows being produced by Netflix, I don't know if we'll ever see them released.
Oh yeah, so just in case you're wondering, I did look to see if the Lasser Glass, which is from Oculus, which if you haven't listened to our episode on that, definitely go check out that because that was an awesome episode. We actually got our minds blown by kind of the Flanagan universe that we didn't even know existed. But yeah, it is not in this movie.
About to say, I didn't see it.
But he did put it in Ouija Origin of Evil, which actually came out the same year as Hush. So I don't know why he included it in one and not the other, but
it hadn't caught on yet.
Yeah, it hadn't caught on yet. Also, just in case you haven't heard, we are back doing the horror news over on the Patreon. It is its own thing now. So come and hang out with us over there if you want to stay up to date on all the interesting bits of news. We just did the 3rd episode, actually. And it's got some really, really good news. We got a bunch of stuff coming out on streaming and trailers for movies coming out. And then we even included a bunch of cool Scream 7 rumors, leaks, and all that stuff. So check it out. And speaking of news, in case you haven't seen our social media posts, we got a fuck ton of stickers now. And we are giving some of them away to you guys. So if you want to make your friends and families jealous or just show the world that you're a fan of this awesome horror movie podcast, hit us up, get some stickers. And for those of you that have already put your order in, we're going to work on getting them out to you guys starting this week. So be on the lookout for that and be patient because we have to individually package, fill out all the addresses, and send a bunch of these things out. So it's going to take some time. But yeah.
You will get stickers.
You'll get stickers
lots
eventually.
Of stickers. We have enough stickers to literally wallpaper our entire house in stickers.
Yeah, we posted the picture of how would you describe it? Like, fucking, are they like massive bundles?
I would describe it as what you would think a kilo of Coke.
I was gonna
wrap them up like that.
Yeah, I was like thinking that, but I'm like, how would I say that without just saying a kilo of Coke?
They had to come through customs, so I imagine customs opened that shit up and was like, "What the fuck is this?" At first.
Also, man, we just came out of the theater from seeing Hard Eyes, and we didn't do a review on it because we're so busy right now. But thumbs up for me, man. It's definitely fun. It's a fun slasher. Check it out. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely not like a crazy intricate story, anything like that. It's very straight up slasher. They don't try to get too fancy with things. Just some good old killing
and comedy.
Comedy. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of comedy horror, but I think they did it in a really good way. Like it doesn't take over the movie, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So that's a really fine balance and a thing that's really hard to get right. And I think that they did it really good. And then on top of that, the acting from all the actors, pretty good.
Yeah, it has. I love the killer reveal because it's a slasher. You gotta have a killer reveal. The killer reveal was great. I really enjoyed it. The killer himself looks pretty good. It's got some good kills in it, man. I don't know if I'd say, hey, rush out to your theater and see it, but definitely see it. I will say that.
Yeah, if you're looking for a comedy slasher / romance movie for Valentine's Day, it's good for that. It's not going to replace the OG My Bloody Valentine for a Valentine's Day slasher, but it is a good one to turn to.
I hope it does well because I want companies to start making cheesy holiday slashers again. We've been missing that for some time. I want to see that come back.
Yes, we need more holiday slashers so we have stuff to cover on holidays.
Yep, this is true. And with that being said, are you ready to dive into Hush?
I am so fucking excited.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at GrindhouseSyndicate.Horror.Pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want a serial killer to trap us in a house located in the woods, give us a review. All right, so Hush is a 2016 American slasher film directed and edited by Mike Flanagan and starring Katie Siegel. Siegel, is it Siegel or Siegel? No, it's Siegel. I don't know why I'm thinking of Seagal, the fucking douchebag.
You're asking, I'm pretty sure it's Siegel, but yeah, you're asking like the one person that if you had to phone a friend for this question, don't call me.
But yeah, also stars her, who also co-wrote the film with Flanagan. The film co-stars John Gallagher Jr., Michael Trucco, and Samantha Sloyan. It was jointly produced by Trevor Macy through Intrepid Pictures and Jason Blum through Blumhouse Productions. It had a budget of $1 million and a box office, and no box office because it was released by Netflix on April 8th of 2016. The project was kept a secret until September of 2015, when it was revealed at the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival. It was also disclosed that Mike Flanagan had directed the film and co-wrote it with his wife, Katie Siegel. Why do I keep saying Siegel? Siegel, who would also star in it. Flanagan said that he made the main character a deaf mute because he wanted to direct a film without dialogue. The possibility of making the film entirely silent was briefly considered, but was soon abandoned when Flanagan had decided that building tension with this limitation would be impossible. He also realized that most people would be hesitant to even watch a silent film nowadays, so he decided to stick with the very limited dialogue. The script itself consisted largely of scene directions, which Flanagan and Siegel developed by acting out in their own house, which is a really interesting way to write a story.
He said it was the neighbors probably thought they were fucking crazy.
Yeah, because I've seen some interviews with them talking about it, and Katie would lock him out of the house, and then he would just look for different ways to try to break in and get in. And she would try to prevent him from getting inside. And then they would be oh, well, this is a good idea. We'll write this into it. Very interesting way to write a movie.
Yeah. So when they did all that, they would take certain things, every time they would run it, things that felt natural. For example, her grabbing the knife and the hammer at the same time. And then her writing a note with the lipstick. And all that came from all those preparations of him trying to break in. And they took everything that felt really good and generic, and he said it was, his exact quote was a bag of tricks to go to when he was writing the full script.
Yeah, I think that really adds to this movie. It really, because this is a slasher, it's kind of a standard slasher, killer tries to kill final girl, whatever, but it has uniqueness to it. And this is part of the uniqueness.
It's a slasher, but to me, it's more of a psychological horror movie. That is what shines in this movie to me. The slasher part, awesome, but the idea of somebody that can't hear, that already has a major limitation, and then you take everything away from her to possibly get any help, and then somebody tormenting her in a house, when you put yourself in her shoes, like, that's what makes this movie actually parts of it are terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. I talk about that actually a couple times when we go through the plot. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, so they used their own house to basically act this out and help write the script. But considering the fact that so much of the script was based around their house, it ended up being problematic for the actual filming. Because when they went to shoot the film in Alabama, they could not find a house similar enough to theirs, and this caused them to have to go in there and significantly alter the film script. To represent Maddie's world, various ambient sounds were used, including the addition of an ultrasound machine. Flanagan did not want to use pure silence for these scenes because he thought it would take viewers out of the experience. Because of the challenges of shooting in a single location, Flanagan had to carefully plan out the cinematography in order to keep the film interesting to the audience, especially considering the main character was mute. In order to accomplish this, Flanagan used a Steadicam to follow Siegel's every move, along with a boom mic and a spotter. Unfortunately, though, the boom mic audio for these scenes could not be used and had to be redone in post, with Flanagan noting that the audio initially sounded like a herd of elephants. I don't know what they could have done for that.
I know it was so silent, and with her running around the house to different scenes,
Yeah, that's a
the
good point.
hardwood floor, her running around on it probably was just so bad they didn't use any of it.
So because of this, Siegel had to actually go in and ADR her own breaths into the film during post-production. Even because this movie really relies a lot on sound, and there's a lot of scenes where she's breathing heavy and that is the only thing you can really hear in the scene.
Yeah,
so that's important.
The audio is a huge part of this movie.
Mm-hmm. So Hush then had its world premiere at South by Southwest on March 12th of 2016 to genuinely positive reviews. Prior to the premiere, Netflix acquired worldwide distribution rights to the film, but on April 7th of 2023, the film was removed from the platform as the company's distribution license had expired. This was then confirmed by Flanagan, stating that they only had licensed it for 7 years, while also stating his intentions for a physical release in the future. And the future must be now, because a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray Collector's Edition was released by Shout Factory on November 26th of 2024, which included never-before-seen footage and a black and white shush cut version of the film.
Yeah, so the shush cut, I didn't watch the shush cut on my Scream Factory version because I knew that you weren't writing it off of that. But I did see him talk a lot about it. And he said he originally felt for this movie to be like a black and white movie. So he essentially told Scream Factory that, and they were like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Because he's like, I wanted it to that way, but I was never going to get a chance to do it. And then Scream Factory was like, fuck yeah, that sounds awesome. Do it. So whenever he was doing the restoration for that, he was sitting in there, and I guess they had the sound real low because whenever they're in there doing the restoration, they keep the sound. He said they keep it on slightly just so you can know where you're at in the movie, but they don't turn it up. And he was watching it, and he was like, holy shit, this movie's way creepier without any of the background score and suspense. Like driving the audience it just makes it so much more creepy up until the very end of the movie when it really needed it. And so that's black and white's a big difference, but another huge difference of it is the audio. It's literally like you're there.
So there's no music. There's just what's going on in the scene is the only.
Yeah.
Oh man, I gotta watch that.
And I've seen some shots from it when he was talking about it, and it seems really fucking creepy. And he's like, I know like certain people are really big horror fans and they're gonna love it. A lot of people don't wanna watch a movie in black and white these days, let alone with, like, no score and hardly no dialogue, but he's like, "I love it. This is what the movie really, in my head, originally was, and to be able to get to do the cut of it's awesome." It's just, like, one of the scenes I seen is when he's slapping the neighbor girl's hand on the window, and just with nothing in the background but that sound, it's just it's so much more real and scary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to black and white movies. Like, I think there are some movies that are really good at, like, The Lighthouse. Robert Eggers did Lighthouse in black and white, and that is, I don't think I'd want to see that movie in color. It looks really good. There are some other movies, like even his newer Nosferatu. You could have a black and white version of that, and it would still be good. I'm not a fan of this movie being in black and white because I love the color palette that they use for the movie. So I would keep that, but I think that the sound idea is great. I'm all for that. But I definitely plan to watch that version.
Yeah, definitely. I want to check it out. Another thing they did is they didn't just black and white it, but they upped the contrast a bunch too. So it gives it a really cool cinematography feel. I'd watch it in color if I could choose to watch the audio cut of that in color.
Yeah, I agree.
But I am still, after seeing clips of it and hearing them talk about it, definitely excited to check that out.
Yeah, so anyway, on April 20th, 2016, Stephen King wrote about the film saying, "How good is Hush? It's up there with John Carpenter's Halloween." I'm gonna disagree with that.
Yeah, Halloween is a perfect movie.
Yeah.
It is a really, really awesome. Everything about the score is iconic, but this movie is up there. Like, it's not on that level. Very few things are, but it is a really good movie.
It's a good movie. In my opinion, it's not up there with Halloween, but it is a good movie. So I'm gonna disagree with Stephen King on that one. But also, filmmaker William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist, also commented on the film saying, "Hush is a great horror film, ... on Netflix." That's terrifying. And I was like, I'm trying to think of like the context of what he said. Like, is he saying that the movie's terrifying, or the fact that Netflix put out a really good horror movie is terrifying? I don't know. I don't know where he was going with that.
I don't know. He's an old band. Streaming was still like Netflix was just now like really catching on with the streaming. So he was, I don't know. You know how old people get.
So on September 24th of 2021, Midnight Mass, a mini-series based on the Hush story within a story, was created and directed by Flanagan and released on Netflix, which also starred Katie Siegel and Samantha Sloyan. So that is the little connection to the Netflix stuff.
So whenever I picked this movie, a big part of the reason I picked it was because I remember loving this movie, and I hadn't watched it since it first came out on Netflix in 2016.
Yeah, I don't think I've watched it since then either.
Yeah, when I seen there was a physical release by Scream Factory, I fucking jumped on that. Super stoked about that. The 4K restoration looks it looks amazing. But anyway, Midnight Mass came out way after that. So I never knew of that connection, that little Easter egg. And when I caught it, I was like, holy shit. Like, yeah, I wonder if that book is the book what is the basis of Midnight Mass. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was like a Easter egg to the future when he put it in.
It was.
Mike Flanagan's so fucking good. He put a future Easter egg in a movie.
Yeah, and to think that, Netflix is going to give you a bunch of money to film this really long series based on this very tiny idea you had in another movie, like 7 years later? How do you predict that?
I don't know. Did he do a future Easter egg, or did he do a whole series that was an Easter egg?
I don't know.
Who can do a whole Easter egg series?
Every time we do a Flanagan movie, we're like, at some point in the episode, our minds are blown about something. All right, so ratings. Rotten Tom gave it a 91%. Really
good.
high. IMDb gave it a 6.6 out of 10. Letterboxd gave it a 3.2 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 4 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming for free on Tubi and Zumo Play. Oh, Zumo Play and Plex. Or you can rent it on Amazon Prime, Roku, and YouTube. Are you ready to dive into the plot of Hush?
I am ready.
All right, so we start off with a nice overhead shot of the woods, and as we slowly pan down, we see this nice little house all by itself with only one car in the driveway. We then get a bunch of close-up shots of a woman cooking dinner, which reminded me a lot of the Dexter intro, where he's like cooking the breakfast, and it's like you're basically super close up to the food. But anyway, this woman is our main character, Maddie, and unfortunately for her, she is deaf. And I don't mean like she can't hear so good, like actually deaf. She cannot hear shit, which I will say, hats off to the deaf community. I don't know how you guys do it. Like losing your sight or hearing abilities is like an actual nightmare. And the fact that most deaf people continue to live their lives normally and sometimes, like our main character here, all alone, props to those people. So anyway, Maddie here, she's cooking up a storm, and we see that she is following this recipe off her laptop, which is just sitting on the counter. And we see that she has just received an iMessage from Sarah next door. And this tells us that despite her living in a pretty secluded house in the middle of the woods, she does have neighbors that she's familiar with, and they obviously aren't that far away. So she's not out here like completely alone. So Sarah says that she just finished reading Maddie's book because Maddie is a published author. That is kind of why she lives out here alone, because she's currently writing another book. So Sarah asks if she can stop by, and Maddie says, sure, come on over. She then gets some food for her cat, and as she looks out the door, she sees Sarah walking down her long dirt driveway. So Sarah and Maddie then greet each other, where Sarah shows off her new sign language skills, which she has been learning so she can better communicate with Maddie. We also find out here that Maddie has the ability to read lips, so she is able to understand regular people without sign language. And she explains to Sarah that she has a voice that she hears inside of her head that while writing kind of plays out every different way her stories can end. And this is important because this is going to come back later.
Yeah. Yeah, this is important. And they also do a really good job in this movie at showing her perspective and kind of what she's talking about.
So while talking about Maddie's new book, the girls get interrupted when the fire alarm goes off because it turns out that Maddie got distracted by Sarah and burned her food in the oven. They then both run inside where Sarah makes a comment about how loud the fire alarm is, and Maddie then informs her that it has to be that loud because she must be able to feel the vibrations from the sound waves in order to know if something's on fire. Which is interesting because I have actually never thought about that. Like, what do deaf people do when shit like this is happening? Like your house is on fire.
Yeah, they did like a really good job at that. And after this scene, I probably spent 5 minutes just thinking about shit that deaf people have to deal with. Like being deaf and living on your own would kind of just the thought of that being horrifying in itself. Like anything can happen in your house and you wouldn't know it was happening.
Yeah, this movie, as somebody who doesn't have that disability, this movie really opens your eyes. That's why I kind of was talking about earlier, like a shout out to those people, because there's all these everyday things that you don't think about that, a deaf person has to deal with. That's their life, man. They have to deal with it all the time. So a little later, Sarah says that since Maddie burned her food, she should come over to her house and watch a movie. But unfortunately, Maddie declines, saying that she must get some work done tonight. So Sarah then says goodbye and tells her that she will stop by tomorrow. And as Sarah walks away, we then see Maddie get a text from a man named Craig saying, I was thinking about you today. And after Maddie reads it, she quickly deletes it. So obviously, fuck Craig.
Yeah, Craig to dick.
While Maddie cleans up the kitchen, we get some close-up shots of her books where we get a little background info on her. And it says, after contracting bacterial meningitis at 13, she suffered hearing loss and temporary vocal paralysis. Complications and surgery later that year caused permanent speech and hearing loss. So not only can Maddie not hear, but she also cannot speak, which, in my opinion, shows how good of an actress Katie Siegel is, because she has to play out this whole movie with just like facial expressions and body movements. It's hard to entertain an audience and make it a believable character without being able to like say anything. But she does. She does a really good job here.
Yeah, she killed it. The idea of this movie came about on one of their dates.
Yep.
They were on a date and they talked about it, and Mike Flanagan, he based it off a couple different things. One of them was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode called Hush.
Oh, that's one of my favorite episodes, actually. Yeah. That's good to know.
Yeah, that was one of the things he referenced. And then she was talking about some slashers, and then they kind of combined those ideas. He said, like, literally, while they were at dinner, he went and called Jason Blum and pitched this idea. Like, they had just come up with it. But he said he was very confident early on that she was a good enough actress to carry this movie and to pull this character off, because it was going to take a certain type of actress to be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So we then jump to nighttime, where we see Maddie struggling to write the ending of her new book. And after a bit of frustration, she decides to give it a rest and video chat with Craig. But before he gets a chance to answer, she quickly hangs up. But Craig immediately calls her back. So obviously, Craig was a love interest of Maddie's, and something has went wrong, and they appear to be broken up.
I thought, I may have seen it wrong, so I thought she was calling Sarah, and then Craig called, and she hung up. She closed the laptop real quick.
No, she called Craig, and then as soon as it said dialing, she shut it.
Yeah. Clearly, these two have a thing.
Yeah, they have a history.
And this is one interesting thing about this movie is Mike Flanagan normally has these amazing backstories. This story is just right into it. Like, we don't know the backstories of any of these characters. But pretty much in this movie, all we know is that Maddie has a neighbor named Sarah. She's deaf. She's an author. And there's a guy, Craig, that she obviously has some connection with.
Yeah, an interesting thing was, the Craig thing. There's never really anything there. Like, I don't know if that was a bigger part of the story and got cut out later or something, but you would think with this going on, there would be something down the road like that would happen with the Craig character, but he never really comes into play besides this right here.
He's not even casted.
Yeah.
I do think that this part was added in because a little later on she writes, "My boyfriend's coming," and the motherfucker, as I like to call him, I think he's the man in the credits, but the killer in this movie literally reads out a text that he read in her phone from Craig, basically telling her, "I know you're full of shit, that you don't have a boyfriend." So that's what I think that this whole thing was put in here for.
So Maddie bails on talking to Craig, and while she begins to straighten up the living room and the kitchen, we suddenly see a very distraught and disheveled Sarah run up to Maddie's door and begin banging on it while yelling for help. We then get a shot from inside the house where we can see an oblivious Maddie cleaning up the kitchen while a very scared Sarah, who's only like 10 feet away, begs for her help. And unfortunately, Maddie doesn't see her there, and obviously she can't hear her, so she has no idea that this is going on. While Sarah continues banging on the glass door, we suddenly see a fucking arrow slam into her back and enter her body. Before Sarah can even react, though, we see a masked man run up behind her, grab her by the throat, and begin choking her. Then, while holding Sarah still with one hand, he uses the other to pull a hunting knife from his belt and stabs it deep into Sarah's stomach. And all this is happening just mere feet away from Maddie, who still has no idea.
Yeah, this scene is the scene that locked me in. The first time I seen this, I was like, okay, not only is the kill fucking brutal, But the psychological aspect of it, this when it really hits you in the movie of what this movie's gonna be about.
Yeah.
And the audio is so loud when Sarah's banging on the door and then she's getting stabbed to death. And then what I loved about this movie is they give you Maddie's perspective. And then they snap to Maddie's perspective where it's just silence and she's in the background, literally 5 feet away outside the door getting fucking slaughtered.
Yep. So the masked guy then starts repeatedly stabbing Sarah in the gut until she finally dies. But while he's doing this, he is intentionally slamming the knife into her, making her body slam against the glass door. Because he is trying to get Maddie's attention. That way, when she turns around, he gets to see her frightened reaction, which explains why he is kind of disappointed when he's doing this and she doesn't turn around. Because remember, this guy doesn't know Maddie's death. So I'll go ahead and quickly explain what this killer looks like in case you haven't seen the movie. So he has an average kind of slim body type. He's wearing some black pants and a gray hoodie with the black like tactical vest. He's got a large tattoo on the side of his neck and a solid white mask that just kind of covers his face only. The mask is mostly blank with a kind of like happy expression on it, kind of like a smirk. And because the mask is only covering his face, he's also wearing a black beanie on his head. So this is our slasher villain of the film.
Yeah, he said they went through a lot of iterations of different masks, but essentially what they ended up doing is they took a blank face. I forgot the mask that they pasted off of, but it's just a blank face, but the eyes are what really make it creepy. And then they added the Mona Lisa smile. That's what that is.
Because it's like a barely a smirk. It's hard to really tell.
And he said whenever they hit that was it. Like it won out by far. Everybody knew as soon as that got put together, they were like, okay, this is it.
For me, the Mona Lisa, the look on her face always looks like, she's like sitting in a meeting with like 10 other employees and she's holding in a fart. Like she's like, it's on the verge of coming out. Like, and she's like, she doesn't want everyone else to see she's straining, but she's straining.
You think when they were painting that picture of her, she had to fart the whole time? She didn't want to do it.
A very real possibility.
You couldn't fart in front of people back then.
Oh,
not a woman. Women can't fart.
You'd be killed.
Yeah.
You'd be accused of witchcraft and killed. So after he kills Sarah, he just throws her down right there on the deck, and he then begins to just like stand there and stare at Maddie while she cleans. And this scene is creepy as fuck. Especially if you have ever been home alone at night by yourself and realized that you left the blinds open and thought, this thought pops in your head that like some psycho could just be standing out there watching you and you'd have no idea. Or maybe that's just a me thing, but I have definitely done that.
That's definitely a thing. Because, as you know, my wife likes to leave the fucking blinds open out back all the time.
Yeah.
And
pitch black out there. You can't see.
Yeah. The thought of somebody can see you so well, but you can't see them it's just an inherently creepy thought anyway. So yeah, this is super, super creepy shot. And imagine having that and being deaf at the same time. So then you're not only like thinking there could be somebody out there watching me, you probably have random thoughts like there could be somebody broke in my house right now and I would have no fucking idea. Like I might walk out of my room to go pee in the middle of the night and there could be somebody there and I would have no idea.
Yep. So after a minute of just standing there like a fucking weirdo, he then, using the tips of his fingers, begins tapping on the glass in order to get Maddie's attention. But once that doesn't work, he then balls his hand into a fist and begins banging on the glass. After he tries this and Maddie still doesn't turn around, he then says fuck it, he'll play the long game as he drags Sarah's body away before Maddie sees it. Maddie then finishes up in the kitchen and heads to the living room where she gets another call from Craig, which she again ignores. She then sits on the couch and opens up her laptop, and while she's attempting to work on her story again, we start to hear loud bangs coming from right outside of the house. And just as she starts typing on the keyboard, we see the masked man open her kitchen door and walk inside. Now, I know, you live out in the country and there's not a lot of crime out there, but you should still lock your goddamn doors. Like, I mean, just to leave your door just unlocked at nighttime is wild to me. I don't know
Yeah.
if people do that out in the country, but you should just lock your doors.
Well, we do hear some loud bangs, so he may have, like, jarred the door open. They do a really good job in this scene of kinda jumping to her perspective too while she's on the computer
Mhm.
and showing that she can't hear this guy coming in. So, he could have, like, grabbed a fucking crowbar or something
He
and
could have, but he
broke
doesn't
in.
do that later on when he's trying to get in. So I
No, and
assume
she does run around the house and lock all the doors, so I think you're right. I think she's left her doors unlocked because she is crazy and deaf.
So he then begins to walk right up behind her, and he then pulls out his large knife and starts loudly tapping the blade against his vest. So he's pretty much testing how deaf she is. So right after this, she gets a video call from her sister Max, and when the killer hears this, he just slides kind of off to the side a few feet away, just out of the way enough to not be seen by Max. So while talking to Max, we learn that her and Craig have been broken up for almost a year now, and Max really wants Maddie to move in with her and come back to the city. Maddie declines this offer, but before she can say much else about it, Max interrupts her by telling her that she's seen something move in the background. And what Max saw was the killer reach over the counter and take Maddie's phone. But Maddie blows Max's concern off, saying it was probably just the cat in the background. So after the call ends, we then see Maddie get up and look for the cat, but the cat's nowhere to be found. Then Maddie does some dumb shit where she leaves the kitchen door open, I guess hoping the cat wanders its way back into the house. She then heads back over to the couch and begins working on her book again. But a few seconds later, she gets another iMessage, but this time it is from her own phone. She then opens the message where we see some pictures load, and Maddie then becomes very confused because these pictures are her in her house taken just moments ago. This is literally this would be one of my worst nightmares. I would shit a brick.
Yeah, this right here is the most psychologically horrifying part of the movie for me. Although, like, there's a ton of action later on and them two going back and forth. But this scene, if you put yourself in her shoes, especially as a deaf person, you're literally looking at pictures from your phone that were taken of you. So now not only do you know this person's in the house, but you know this person wants you to know that they're in the house. And that's fucking terrifying. This scene changes the whole perspective of the movie.
So after about 3 or 4 pictures that pop up on the screen, Maddie realizes that they are being taken from the open kitchen door. Maddie is drenched in fear as she slowly moves closer to the door, and after a few steps, she finally sees the killer standing there staring at her while holding her phone. Maddie then rushes to the door in an attempt to beat the killer and get it closed, and they both kind of arrive at the same time and begin to wrestle with the handle. Thankfully, though, Maddie is able to get it closed and latched, locking the killer out for now. After realizing all of the surrounding doors and windows are locked, the killer gives up and walks out into the yard. After he walks around to the other side of the house and out of Maddie's view, she runs over to her computer and attempts to call for help. Unfortunately, though, she is not quick enough on the draw this time, and right before she hits the call button, the killer shuts the power off, causing the Wi-Fi to go out. Why the fuck did they put the power boxes on the outside of houses anyway? It seems like just a bad idea that anybody could just come and cut your fucking power off at any time. That seems like that should be something inside the house.
Well, we don't have a power thing outside, but I mean,
we have
really
a bunch of shit on the side over there.
Yeah, there's no like power switch, but realistically, if somebody wanted to cut the line to your house, they could definitely do that. Yeah, this movie, so you kind of got the sense that this guy enjoys the fear that he gets from his victims more than he enjoys the killing itself. And he's just now discovered that he has stumbled into a gold mine of fear. Like he essentially he knows when she locks him out, he can break the window at any time in another part of the house and she'll have no idea. But you realize he wants to play the long game now and he's going to drag out every inch of fear he can get out of her.
Yeah, he's a bastard. As Maddie sits there in disbelief, realizing that she is trapped in here with no way to get any help, the killer decides that this is a real good time to fuck with her as he stands at the window that she's watching him from and drags his bloody knife across the glass. I guess he thinks he's fucking Ghostface or some shit.
Well, I think that this scene was him showing her that he's already killed her neighbor, because that's the only woman around. Like, she lives out in the middle of nowhere. And she's probably thinking, like, if this knife has blood on it already, whose blood could it be?
Yeah, I don't know if she's putting that much together yet because of something that's about to happen, but it adds to the creep factor, the scare factor, for sure.
I don't know. If I was in that situation and somebody rubbed a bloody knife across my window, my first thought would be, whose blood is that? Like, okay, this guy is serious. Like, he's done killed something or somebody.
So after a few minutes of this, the killer then walks off, leaving Maddie scared and confused. She then gets up and walks over to the kitchen door again, where she watches him stab holes in all 4 of her tires, which me personally wouldn't stop me from getting in that motherfucker and driving on them rims, but to Maddie, the car is out of the picture. So after this, we get a really awesome shot of Maddie pretty much realizing that she is fucked and that there is no way to escape. We see her start to cry a little bit, and we actually get to kind of hear what she hears. And they do this by kind of muting everything else and just playing this like almost like white noise. I think it's like a sound machine or something. But I love that they do this. And I think it's awesome because it puts you there with the character almost in her shoes.
Yeah, I think that was the most genius part about the way they did this story, was that they gave us her audio perspective, where a lot of movies, they could make the same movie and not add that in there, and it would be much different. But having her audio perspective really puts you in her shoes, and it makes the movie much more scary.
So after a few moments, Maddie has one last idea to possibly get herself out of this situation. She then grabs her lipstick tube and writes a message for the killer on her glass door. And this message says, "Won't tell, didn't see face, boyfriend coming home." So she's basically saying here, if you just leave now, I won't be able to tell the cops who you are because I didn't see your face. Also, you might want to get out of here soon because her boyfriend's on the way home. It's not a bad plan. It's not that great either because this killer is not like somebody who's worried about getting caught or freaked out. He's way too calm and cool and collective for him to really be worried about any of this stuff. I give her props for trying, but I don't think this guy was going to fall for that.
Well, yeah, I think it was a good idea. We do see later on in the movie how he reacts when another male is around. Mm-hmm. And that, had he not had her phone and knew that she was full of shit, that may have made him a little more hesitant, or maybe he would have just got the job done instead of dragging this fucking torturous night out. But yeah, I think it was a good idea.
So the killer reads this shit and he looks at Maddie for a moment and he then removes his fucking mask, revealing his identity. And pretty much telling her he doesn't give a fuck about that because he's going to kill her no matter what. And the look on Maddie's face when he does this tells us that she gets the message loud and clear and she's now scared to death.
Yeah, he has no intentions of letting her live.
By the way, did this guy look familiar to you at all?
Yeah, from the first time I watched Hush.
So this actor's name is John Gallagher Jr., and he actually played Emmett in a little film called 10 Cloverfield Lane. He's actually like the lovable character in that, and And he does good because he plays lovable in that, and he plays really shitty in this.
Yeah, so they talked about that. Mike Flanagan did, and I forgot which show he was in. It's not a horror show, but Mike Flanagan was talking about how much he loved the show, and he was a big fan of his, and that everything this guy plays in, he's like the sweetest person.
Yeah.
He'd say he's the sweetest person on and off screen. And so initially he wanted to put like this hulking figure, somebody bigger, a guy who would be scary. And it was his wife, Katie's idea that, no, wouldn't it be scarier if this was just a regular sized, normal guy that you would see anywhere? And whenever he heard that, he realized she was right. And this guy came to his mind because he's just like, he's the nicest fucking guy ever. This is who we got to cast. So when he sent him the script, his agent called back and he's like, he read the script, he likes it, but there's some confusion here. He thinks that you want him to read for the part of Sarah's husband. And he's like, no, we want him as the killer. And he's like, okay, he's in. Like, he's in. He's super excited to play this character because he's never got to play it before. But even he knew he was so typecast into that nice guy role that he thought that there was a mistake, a typo, and that he really wanted him to play the husband.
Oh, good for him. So the killer then asks Maddie if she can read his lips, which we know she can, and he basically tells her that her message about her boyfriend coming home is bullshit, as he then, word for word, repeats what Max said to her earlier about moving in with her and coming back to the city because she shouldn't be living out here all alone. He then tells her with like this dead, expressionless look that he can come in anytime he wants and he can kill her anytime he wants. But first, he is going to mentally torture her. So this guy it's not just about killing a person. It's like the whole stalking them, planning it out, trapping them in their house, watching them panic. He's kind of like a cat playing with his food. He's very much into the psychological torture.
Yeah, and that actually makes a lot of sense with when we see Sarah. He actually hunted Sarah down with a crossbow, and he was letting her run. So she was literally, he let her get to her neighbor's house and then shot her with a crossbow before he gutted her. So that makes a lot of sense. Like, he's not going to sneak up and kill. He wants to see the fear.
Yep. So he then tells her that they're going to have some fun as he walks off into the dark of the night, leaving Maddie completely shattered emotionally. And it's, pretty much like she's realizing that there's no way out except for death. But only after he tortures her. So after sitting on the stairs trying to get herself together, she then heads into the kitchen, grabs a big ass butcher knife and a hammer from under the sink, and then heads to her bedroom, where she barricades the door, closes the curtains, and sits on the floor by the window. After a few minutes of silence, this fucking guy, who must have x-ray vision, walks right up to the window that she's sitting next to and begins knocking, which pretty quickly turns into banging. I'm not really sure how he knew exactly where she was hiding at in the house, but he knew. And this goes on for a while, which causes Maddie to finally try to look and see what is he doing? And when she does, she sees a horrible sight. It's not the killer standing there. It is a very bloody and dead Sarah, who, I just want to point out, looks really fucking creepy. Her face is covered in dried up blood and dirt, and her eyes are wide open. And the killer is behind her, holding her body up and using her dead ass hand to bang on this glass.
Yeah, I essentially said the same thing. This shot right here is probably the creepiest shot of the movie. There's just something about, I couldn't even put my finger on it. The way he's holding her up, the way her body's slumped over. They do it really good with the cinematography where it's panning over and it looks like her dead body sitting there, with her arm limp smacking the window. And you don't realize it's him holding her up until it moves over further. The way they did that it's creepy.
Yeah.
It literally just invokes like a creeped out feeling.
So this breaks Maddie, who then slowly backs away from the window, dropping her weapons, unlocks the door, and runs out into the living room to have a full-on breakdown. And remember, she didn't know until now that Sarah was killed. She never turned around when he was stabbing her. So this is an even bigger blow because this is like her only close neighbor, the only person nearby that could possibly help her. And she now knows that this dude isn't just fucking with her. Like, this guy is a real deal killer.
Yeah. I also thought from a psychological standpoint in her shoes, she don't even know if he's the only killer.
No,
She
yeah.
has no idea if there's multiple. So she can't even like keep an eye on him and be comfortable. There could be somebody come up behind her at any point. She now, her closest neighbor, her only help's gone. Her phone's gone. Her lights, Wi-Fi, all that's gone. On top of not being able to hear anything, she can't get in a car and take off. She clearly has no guns. Like, this is truly, he has stripped her of everything.
She can't even scream for help.
Yeah, he has literally stripped her of fucking everything, and it's a cat and mouse game.
So Maddie just sits on the floor hysterically crying, and we get that cool, dead, silent white noise thing as she goes into a full-on panic attack. But before she just full-on gives up, she remembers something. Sarah always kept her phone in her back pocket, and if she can distract him long enough, maybe she can get to Sarah's body and use her phone to call for help. So she quickly grabs her keys and sets off her car alarm, causing the lights to flash and the horn to loudly beep. And the killer then hears this from the back of the house where he drops Sarah's body and runs around to see what's going on. So while he runs to the front to deal with the car, Maddie runs back to her bedroom where she opens her window, reaching for Sarah's body and checking for her phone. But unfortunately, no phone is to be found. And to make matters worse, as she is still checking, the killer comes running around the corner where he spots Maddie hanging out of the window and goes to grab her. Now, thankfully, Maddie is able to quickly get back inside, and right as she is going to close the window, the killer goes to grab her, and this causes her to slam the window down onto his wrist. And as he attempts to reopen the window enough to pull his arm out, Maddie grabs the hammer from the floor next to her and slams the pointy end into his arm, causing him to scream in pain and move away from the window with the hammer still lodged into his flesh. So Maddie finally has some points on the board here. She's back in the game.
Yeah, a claw hammer, the claw end of a claw hammer dug into your arm would be so fucking excruciatingly painful. Like, way worse than even a stab, because it's so thick and dull.
So the killer then cries like a little bitch as he painfully removes the hammer out of his arm, and we see when he pulls his sleeve up that this has caused quite a wound as blood pours from the mangled skin and muscle. Well, needless to say, he is pissed after this, and it makes it even worse when he looks up at Maddie and she's like staring down at him with that fuck you look through the window. So he then reveals Sarah's phone in his pocket, and it's already smashed, so he's just kind of rubbing it in. And while Maddie watches him through the glass, he removes one of Sarah's earrings as a keepsake and puts it in his vest pocket. Sarah's phone was Maddie's last hope for calling for help, and the reveal that it's already destroyed kind of just takes the wind out of her sails here, as she then turns around and slowly walks back towards the living room. And the killer must have not have gotten enough attention from his mommy and daddy, because when Maddie turns and walks away from him, he gets even more mad and begins pounding on the glass and yelling, trying to get her attention again, because he's a little bitch. So a little while later, Maddie starts to hide around different spots in the house where she can kind of watch where the killer is going. She then sees him walk around the back side of the house, and she decides it is time to make a run for it. She then quietly opens the front door and makes her way down into the yard, where she sees the killer head towards the back door. When he comes back around to the front looking for a way in, we see that Maddie has hidden underneath the front porch. This is another cool little detail that I love that they threw in here, is when he walks up onto the porch and he's above her, she places her hand like flat against the wood so she can feel him walking in the direction he's walking in. And this is really smart because it's very easy to forget that she's deaf. And they have to kind of be creative enough to keep reminding like us, the audience, that she isn't like your typical final girl just up against your typical killer.
Yeah. I also like the plan of hitting the woods. If I was her, I would be in a corner with a gun. Clearly, she doesn't have a gun available, and at that point, you're kind of screwed if you don't have a weapon. This guy's got a crossbow. So the next best thing for me, I would think I got a much better chance of not being found in these woods where I could be anywhere. But even that, as a deaf person, would be horrifying.
Yeah,
like,
that's still...
Think about like opening the door. You don't know how the door may squeak a certain way that you don't know about. How loud your footprints are running through dead leaves and shit. Like just the anxiety of the noise that you're going to make that you don't even know about. It's like, fuck, what do you do?
I feel like, leaving the house and going into the woods is just kind of trading one really bad situation with a ton of anxiety and fear for another situation that is different, but I feel like you still have the same anxiety and fear. It's just in a different location.
I mean, you would be running through the woods and he could be right behind you chasing you and you would have no idea. He could be creeping up, walking up and making tons of noise walking through the leaves. You would never know it. But my thought process would be the plan with the car alarm and going out the back window was a really fucking good plan. Unfortunately, the phone thing didn't work for her. But had she taken off in the woods then and closed the door behind her, it would have taken him a while before he went in the house, searched the entire house, and then realized she went off in the woods. And he would really have no idea at that point what direction she got away in. So the chances of him finding her in endless woods that surround this house are probably pretty slim.
So after looking around the house, the killer gets confused because he can't see Maddie through any of the windows anymore. He's like, where'd this bitch go? So he then decides to walk around the back again, and once Maddie sees him get far enough away, she makes a run for it, heading straight for the wood line. But trouble is right behind her because as soon as she gets close to the woods, she sees a crossbow bolt suddenly appear in the tree in front of her. She then turns to look where she spots the killer standing next to the house reloading his weapon. Thankfully, though, she is able to turn back and run for the front door before he can get it loaded again, and right as she makes it inside and slams the door, another bolt hits the door frame. So after this, Maddie comes up with another plan. She then heads to the second story of the home where she spots the killer standing around the front of the house, kind of looking off into the distance. She then grabs a small light and climbs out of a window onto the roof of the first floor. After checking again to see if the coast is still clear, she then turns this light onto like a strobe setting and throws that motherfucker with all her might into the woods behind the house. That thing went far as hell.
It did. She's got a good throw.
Maddie does not throw like a girl. She can fucking throw. So the killer hears this thing land in the woods, and when he goes to look, he spots the light like way out in the trees. So he heads out there to see what it is, and as he walks away, we see Maddie laying flat on her stomach watching him leave. She then quietly sneaks over to another part of the roof where she attempts to use a lattice to climb down. But just after her first step, suddenly a bolt hits her in the side of her thigh. Maddie takes the shot fairly well though, and kind of just winces in pain while still holding on to the roof. She then pulls herself back up while the killer reloads. Once she fully makes it back onto the roof, the killer fires another bolt at her, but she pulls a Matrix move and manages to just barely lean back and duck the shot. From the ground, the killer can't tell if he hit her or not, so after a few seconds of looking, he decides he must climb the lattice and see. While climbing, we see Maddie painfully remove the bolt from her leg and get into position to face the killer when he makes it to the top. And as soon as he does, he tosses his crossbow up there, allowing himself to pull his body onto the roof. And when that happens, Maddie springs into action. She quickly grabs the crossbow with one hand and punches him in the face with the other, totally catching him by surprise and sending him flying backwards off the lattice and landing on his back in the dirt where he belongs.
It looked like a fucking backhand. It looked like she backhanded that motherfucker into last week.
She laid him out.
Yeah, that fall would have fucking hurt too.
But yeah.
This is a big win for her. That bow and arrow had been a big problem for her.
Well, yeah.
I mean, even on the roof, she wasn't safe. To get the bow and arrow, that's a big deal. Like when she was running out in the woods, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. That arrow hits in front of her. Had it missed that tree, she may have had no idea that he ever even was behind her shooting arrows
until
at her.
She got shot in the back or something. Yeah, she wouldn't know. Even though he just fell like 15 or 20 feet onto his back after getting sucker punched, he immediately gets back up when he sees Maddie looking down at him, attempting to reload the crossbow. As she struggles to figure it out, the killer rushes back to the lattice and starts climbing again. I don't know what he thought was going to happen when he made it to the top again. Like, she has the upper hand. Because once you climb to the top, like, you still have to climb up onto the roof, and she's just going to punch you or fucking kick you in the face or something. Like, I think Maddie gives up an opportunity here by kind of running off, because she could have held him off from getting up on that roof. Like, there's nothing he could have done to stop her from stopping him from getting up there.
I don't know. He's probably running on full adrenaline because he's fucking mad. He just got hit and fell off of a roof. I don't know. I could see in her defense, like her being a not a like very imposing woman, and this guy coming here. Like, what if he got up that lattice and was to get a hold of her foot or something while she was trying to kick him, and he pulled her off? Like, that would kind of be it for her. So I think she just takes this crossbow as a win. Like, I got his main weapon. This is his long distance weapon. This has been a fucking thorn in my side or leg, literally.
Yeah.
So let me just take this and get back in the house and reset.
So she sees him climbing up again, and she grabs the crossbow, taking off towards the still open window that she climbed out of. He makes it to the roof and attempts to chase her, but she manages once again to beat him inside as she slams the window shut right as he's arriving. She then aims the very obviously unloaded crossbow at him as he taunts her from the other side of the glass. After this goes on for a bit, he then slowly walks away minus his favorite weapon. After he's out of sight, she then kind of collapses in pain from the big-ass hole in her leg, which she fucked up when she pulled the bolt out. Like, just, snap it off and leave the tip in so you don't bleed to death. But she just pulled it straight out.
No, she's got to get it out so she can clean her wound.
Yeah, I'd leave it in there.
I don't understand that. Like,
yeah,
clean your fucking wound later. Like, your chances of infection are the least of your worries right now. You have a man actively trying to murder you.
Yeah. So we then see her head into the bathroom where she attempts to do a little first aid on her wound, which we then see her pull her pants down, and it looks pretty bad, and she's bleeding quite a bit. Like, this is not just a flesh wound. This is pretty bad. Unfortunately, though, she isn't able to really do much about this and ends up just pouring a bunch of rubbing alcohol on it and putting her pants back on and attempting to tie a piece of fabric around her leg. I hope that was not supposed to be a tourniquet, because you don't put a tourniquet like on the wound. You put it like above the wound.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but I think she was just trying to put pressure on the wound. it obviously wasn't, like, so much blood, it was like she hit an artery and was gonna bleed to death in a couple minutes, so I think she's just trying to put pressure on it. But yeah, if that was in fact a tourniquet, that's awful placement.
So, after playing doctor on herself, she then picks up the crossbow to figure out how to use it. And while looking it over, she notices these little tick marks on the side that have been intentionally scratched into the paint. So, after putting two and two together, Maddie realizes that this guy has killed 13 people with this thing. Honestly, finding this out would be really scary because you think, like, if this guy has managed to do this to 13 people and none of them can get away or stop him, like, do I even have a chance here?
At a severe disadvantage. Like, not only are you deaf and he's taken everything that you have, but now your leg's fucked up.
Yeah. There's also the fact, too, that he has not been caught. Like, this guy is just, like, really good at killing people and not leaving any evidence behind. Like, this becomes very intimidating.
Yeah, back to the lattice thing, too. I think the reason she took off with the bow into the house is that she thought, okay, I have a weapon. I have an arrow. I have pretty much a gun now. I can get in the house and defend myself. I don't think she realized that she wasn't going to be able to shoot that bow.
Oh, no, she totally doesn't know that until she actually has it in there. So this does freak out Maddie and causes her to panic a bit. She then realizes that she has to figure out this crossbow in order to injure or kill this guy, and she then attempts to pull the string back. If you don't know how to load a crossbow, so you pull the string all the way back until it like locks in this little clip thing that basically it holds the tension on the string. Then you place a bolt in this like slot kind of in front of the string. And then when you go to shoot it, you squeeze the trigger and it releases the string, which then sends the bolt flying at a very fast rate. So she's attempting to pull this string back and it's very hard. Like if you've never tried to mess with a crossbow or like a hunting bow, like a compound bow, it's not easy, especially the bigger they get. The string is very difficult to pull back. And she is not having a lot of luck here. And while she is struggling with that, we see that the killer is watching her from outside the bathroom window, to which she has no idea. And as he's watching her, he is, of course, talking shit when suddenly this nice tender moment that they're having gets interrupted by the sounds of a man knocking on Maddie's front door. Now, Maddie obviously doesn't hear this, but the killer does, and he takes off running towards the front to see who the fuck is here. We then cut to a fit middle-aged white guy who is standing on the porch knocking on the doors and windows, calling out the name Sarah. And this is obviously Sarah's boyfriend who must not have been there when Sarah was attacked, and he has now come home to find his wife missing, and he's at Maddie's looking for her. After getting no answer from anybody at the house, he gives up knocking when he suddenly notices the messages written in lipstick, which definitely seems a little odd. He then pulls out his phone to make a call, but before he can really do anything, the killer comes running around the side of the house, holding a flashlight, yelling, "Get down on the ground and put your hands on your head." So the old pretend to be a cop trick gets him every time.
Yeah, if I seen this guy come up to me, there's no way I would have gave him my phone.
No. You better show me like a fucking badge or something before I even consider that.
Yeah, and who knows the mess he left from his house.
Yeah.
When Sarah was chased out, he's obviously really concerned. He's there looking for her. Yeah. Now, fuck this guy.
So the guy immediately stops dialing on the phone and throws his hands in the air like he just doesn't care. And the killer then walks up onto the porch where he continues giving the mystery man orders, forcing him to get down on his knees. The man then tries to explain that his name is John Stanley. He is a friend of Maddie's. He lives next door and he is just looking for his girlfriend. The killer then demands to see John's ID, to which he hands over his whole wallet after placing his phone on the ground. And with the sudden surprise and shock of this guy running up on him, John hasn't really had a second to think about what's going on here. He's kind of just jumping to the assumption that this guy is a real cop, despite the fact that he isn't dressed like one, doesn't have a badge or radio, and he also has a big ass neck tattoo.
Yeah, I think in his defense, at first, he's got this bright flashlight shining in his face, so he doesn't know who's yelling at him.
Yeah.
But very quickly, once he takes the flashlight out of his face and puts it on his ID, I think that's when the gears start turning.
So, as the killer goes through his wallet, John is starting to become suspicious of this guy. When suddenly the killer flips the script on him, and he then tells John that he doesn't know what happened here. He just responded to a call at this address, and when he arrived, the perpetrator knocked him out cold and stole his gun, phone, and radio. And also apparently his uniform and car, because he don't got neither one of those either.
Yeah, that would have been my thought. Like, okay, but
he stole your clothes? So John, who is eager to help this officer out, starts answering the killer's questions about Maddie, like who she lives with and who Sarah is. And after a brief conversation, he then asks to use John's phone to call for backup. And this is where John starts to really get skeptical about this dude. Despite his gut reaction, though, to not hand over his phone, he does it anyway. The killer then puts in a fake call to dispatch, and once he finishes up, he begins to ask John more questions about Maddie and any neighbors that may live nearby. And he's smart because he does this to distract John from getting his phone back. And as he's talking to John, he just casually slips the phone in his pocket, which John doesn't notice at first. But one thing he does notice is the very bad wound on the killer's wrist from the hammer. And after a bit more talking, John finally does ask for his phone back, and when the killer pulls it from his pocket, he notices Sarah's earring fall out onto the porch. And this instantly sets off alarm bells to John. So John doesn't call him out yet. He starts trying to catch him in a lie. He then asks him who made the call to the police, and the killer responds that this was a resident. And John informs him that it's not possible because Maddie is deaf and mute, and the killer realizes that his lie is quickly falling apart. So while continuing the conversation, John then tells the man that he's pretty sure there is a spare key in the planter next to the porch. The killer then walks down there and tries to find it, and while he is doing that, John secretly picks up a large rock and hides it behind his back. He then walks down a little further, slowly getting closer to the killer in order to make his move, and right before he hits him with the rock, he hears banging coming from the house. He quickly turns his head to spot Maddie slamming her fist against the glass, trying to warn him, when suddenly we see a knife blade enter his neck. She got him fucking killed, man.
She did. It's interesting to point out, like if you've never seen this movie, when you're watching this scene, from the moment he gets there, you're like, oh my God, like Maddie, pay attention. Like, and you realize she can't hear the knocks. And they're out there having this whole ass conversation on the porch. This guy's whole like jig is about to be up. And they do one flash scene to Maddie, who's still sitting in the kitchen trying to get this crossbow.
Yeah.
So the whole time this is going on, she's struggling with that crossbow. And she finally realizes what's going on, and it gets John killed.
So this immediately fucks John up as he drops the rock and kind of stumbles as he places his hand on his neck and feels the wet, warm feeling of fresh blood. Realizing what has just happened, he then goes after the killer, but unfortunately, he doesn't realize how hurt he really is, and because he is losing so much blood so fast, he's kind of just stumbling around. The killer backs away from him, trying to calm him down, telling him it's pretty much over, which, a stab to the neck, hitting the jugular vein, he's not wrong. John comes at him anyway, where the killer quickly moves, slicing John's leg in the process, causing John to drop to the ground. But just when the killer thinks that he is victorious, John jumps up with one last surge of energy, tackling him to the ground and placing him in a serious chokehold. John then rolls over on his back, making it more difficult for the man to try and get free, and we start to see this little bitch struggling to breathe as John chokes his ass out.
Yeah, this guy is a motherfucker. He literally is like the actor who plays him does such a good job at playing very intimidated as soon as a male figure enters the picture. So you get a sense that these 13, 14 kills are all women.
Yeah, most likely.
Like he gets a thrill out of killing women as soon as a male's in the picture, which is a lot of times what happens in real life. But yeah, he's very intimidated. He stabs him in the neck and he's like, "Look, man, so there's no way I would have ever won that fight. Like you're way too big. I had to do it." And even after he gets choked, he's like, "Yep, I would have never won that." Interesting background about this scene. So this was one of the last scenes written in before production. And right before they went into production, Mike Flanagan and Katie went to the Stanley Hotel because he said it's one of his favorite places to write, and he likes to go there before he does movies and shit.
That's cool.
So they went there. They stayed in the famous Stephen King room that Stephen King got the idea of doing The Shining when he was staying there. And they wrote this scene. It was not originally in there. And they wrote this whole scene. And it's not in the credits, but if you pay attention to the movie, he says his name is John Stanley. And that was based off of them writing that scene in the Stanley Hotel, which was the last thing they did before they went and shot this movie.
That's cool. I like that. So we then see that Maddie is still standing at the window watching this go down when suddenly John realizes that he is dying from blood loss and can't hold on much longer. He then looks at Maddie and tells her to run, to which she does. She then takes off out of the back door of the house, where we see the now free killer quickly run up behind her and blast her in the side of the head with a brick, knocking her to the ground. He then climbs on top of her and begins beating her skull in with the brick repeatedly until she is dead. We then see an exhausted and winded killer breathing a sigh of relief as he sits on Maddie's dead body and stares at her bashed-in skull. And that is the end of Hush.
Yeah, I didn't remember that. I didn't remember the movie ending like that. I was very confused.
Yeah, so not really. So as the killer sits and lets in a deep sigh of relief, the camera then slowly zooms into Maddie's bloody, bashed-in brains, where we then see her turn her head and look right into the camera and say, "You can't run." We then see this whole image of a dead Maddie and the victorious killer vanish into thin air as we flash back over to the real Maddie, who is still standing at the door thinking about what to do. Now, if you remember from earlier in the film when Sarah asked Maddie about writing the ending for her books, and she tells her that she has this whole voice thing inside of her head that basically explains every ending possible, that is what is about to happen here. Because instead of a book ending, she's kind of playing out every possibility in this real life situation with this killer. So her death that you've just seen is kind of like her brain playing through, what would happen if she was to try to run right now.
Yeah, this is really cool that they show inside her mind, because she talks about when she's writing the book, like she goes over every possible scenario. And you realize in this scene that, man, it would be really hard to quiet the voices in your head when all you heard was white noise all the time. And I guess this is something that she mentioned she struggles with, but we never get to see this throughout the movie. And they did a really cool scene here, putting us in her perspective, where there is a bunch of versions of her literally talking out every scenario of any decision she could make, which would be extremely overwhelming to make a decision.
Yeah. So we then see an emotionally drained Maddie sitting on the floor and begin to listen to her inner voice go through all these possibilities of how to survive this. So the voice says that she can't outrun him because of her leg. She could kill him with the crossbow, but it would have to be a perfect shot in the heart or the head. Plus, she still can't figure out how to load the damn thing, so that's not a good plan. She then thinks about running outside and trying to cut the power back on, but he may have cut the wires and he will probably just kill her before she figures it out anyway. Her next idea is just hunkering down and hiding for the rest of the night, but he will most likely just break a window and come in. And even if she picks a really good hiding spot and he doesn't find her, she would probably just bleed to death from her leg wound. She then realizes that she is cold, dizzy, and her fingertips are turning blue, which means that she is running out of blood and doesn't have enough time to just wait him out. So, with all of this, she realizes that she can't run, she can't hide, and she can't wait. So, she needs to be on the offensive and come up with a plan that he won't expect. And after pausing for a moment, she realizes that there is only one answer. She's got to kill him. So, next we see the killer open up Maddie's car and take out a tire iron to use as a weapon. He then sits on the hood for a moment and ponders if he should just go into the house and finish it now, or wait for her to lose more blood and go in later. Before he really makes up his mind, though, he gets interrupted by Maddie's cat, who comes wandering up to him. He then reaches down and grabs the cat's fur while stating that he plans on killing it in order to fuck with Maddie some more. But before he even gets his knife all the way out, he gets suddenly blasted by a crossbow bolt into the shoulder. And as he falls to the ground, he then looks over where he sees a very defiant Maddie standing on her porch holding the bow. As she goes to reload, he jumps up and runs after her, causing her to retreat back into the house, dropping the last bolt right outside the door. As she turns and reaches to grab it, the killer then slams her sliding glass door shut, crushing her arm in the process. And when he does this, we see that he is holding the door shut, kind of pinning her hand in there. And as she looks up at him, he smiles and stomps on her hand as hard as he can, breaking most of her fingers. This scene makes me like cringe because like that cracking, breaking sound as he's just like putting all of his weight down on her hand. And then when he like lifts his boot up and we see her fingers like bloody and facing the wrong direction. Like it's a scene, man.
Yeah, the audio on this is brutal. It amplifies the scene completely. You could have a crushed hand scene and it be just a crushed hand scene, but the audio fucking puts this scene over the top.
It does. And he does it like it's not like a split second thing. Like he sits and like, continues to crush and break her hand in all these different ways, and it's just gross.
Yeah, and now she has no weapons, no help, no escape, no phone to get help, no hearing, and her predominant hand is now crushed.
Yeah,
you can't use it.
So after he does this, he is at least decent enough to let the door go, allowing her to pull her mangled hand or what's left of it back into the house. And then, like a creepy-ass weirdo, he stands there smiling as he watches her through the glass, laying there crying in pain. This guy is fucking sadistic, man. To just like relish in someone else's pain like that. And what's really scary is there are a lot of people like that in the world. Maybe not like to the point of murdering people, but they still enjoying doing or like saying fucked up shit to people and then like basking in the glory of like the pain or anger that they've caused. Like we've dealt with that with people in this show. Like, every now and then there's somebody who's, got to make a comment that like literally somebody recently posted last week because I messed up saying a word that, we should just rot. Like it's just weird that there's people out there like this that exist.
Yeah, show us on the doll where the podcast hurt you.
Yeah, it's wild how there are some people that just like they just want to They just want to like watch you suffer or try to hurt you in some way. And this guy is loving the fact that he just fucked her hand up and she's like crying on the floor, and this is bringing him joy.
Well, it's very clear early on that he basks in the torture, the sadism, more than he does the killing.
Oh, yeah.
The killing is just a result. That's how he gets there, but he wants to see them fear for their life before he kills them. He could have went in and killed her from the very beginning when he was in there, but he wants to torture her, which is why he gave her her hand back, so he could stand over her and watch her essentially realize that she is out of options.
So anyway, the killer then bends down to get eye to eye with Maddie as he snaps the last crossbow bolt in half while she watches. He then tells her that he is finally coming into the house to finish her off. And when Maddie hears this, she stops crying, gets a very serious look on her face, stands up, looks him right in the eye, and with her own blood, writes on the glass, "Do it," in big red letters. That's a badass bitch moment of the movie right there.
Savage.
That's an ultimate final girl move. So when she does this, we actually see his expression change because he really enjoys when his victims are scared and they're like freaking out and begging him not to do it. I assume it's because it makes him feel powerful and he needs that because I'm sure in his like day-to-day life, he's a fucking loser who has like no power over anything.
Remember, she's a mute too, so he doesn't get that satisfaction of her begging for his life. So he is literally doing everything he can to milk every bit of like just hope out of her.
But when he sees that despite all he has done to her and her injuries, Maddie isn't backing down or making him feel powerful, he gets kind of a little worried. She then slams the glass right in front of his face with her fist before getting some more blood on her finger and writing the word coward on the glass. He then pulls the classic incel move and basically whatever bitches her as he walks off, just like he got rejected from the school dance. Maddie then quickly grabs her laptop and writes his description and a goodbye note to her family and her sister and stuff, just in case she doesn't make it through this. Because obviously, Maddie is planning to fight to the death here, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, the cinematography on this shot's awesome. As she's typing the description and basically saying she died fighting, you can see him in the background literally hitting the window with this fucking tire iron, shattering to get into the house. So at this moment, when she stands up and writes that in the glass, she has come to terms with the fact that she's going to die. And I'd imagine when you come to terms with that and you accept that, there's nothing left to fear.
Yeah. So while she's doing this, Fuckface returns to the glass door, holding the tire iron, and begins trying to break his way into the house. But unfortunately for him, he's got a tiny penis and not enough strength to break the glass. Maddie...
He drives a lifted truck.
Yeah. Maddie then retreats into the bathroom, closing the door behind her, leaving the killer to just give up and search for another way in. When I first seen this movie, I totally thought like she wanted him to come in because she's done like Home Alone the house up. Like she's got fucking simple but effective traps set everywhere. Like that's what I originally thought. Like that's why she was kind of like putting do it. Like she wants him to come in because I thought she, has some traps going.
Yeah, I think it's like I said. She's realized she's come to terms with she's gonna die. I think he's realized now that he fucked up, and he enjoys them begging for their life, and he has pushed her to a point where she's accepted that she's gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
So now he doesn't get that satisfaction at all, which is what he's there for. So now it's time for him to come in the house and finish it off. He's not getting any joy out of it anymore.
So as she sits on the bathroom floor, just waiting for him to walk through the door at any minute, we see her start to kind of lose consciousness from blood loss. She quickly realizes this and forces herself to focus, And when this is happening, we start to see, in slow motion, glass begin to fall behind her. After most of the glass lands in the tub, we then see the killer's leg drop down behind her as he starts crawling through the broken window. And Maddie, who can't hear shit, has no idea what's happening. As the killer enters the room, he kind of sits right behind Maddie, feeling proud and amused with himself that he was able to get in and sneak right up behind her without her even realizing it. He then gets cocky and he makes a stupid joke while holding his knife just inches away from the back of her head. And after he finishes the punchline of his joke, he laughs at himself, and the breath from his mouth hits the back of Maddie's neck, alerting her that he is right behind her. Right as he goes to stab her, she spins around, causing him to miss her as she stabs him right in the leg with her butcher knife. He then lets out a loud scream as he drops his knife, and Maddie takes off running. I love this whole scene. It's probably my most favorite scene in the movie. The camera work is amazing. The sound is amazing. Like the slow motion glass falling behind her and all that. I loved it, man. This is an awesome scene.
Yeah, great cinematography.
I love, like his breath is what alerts her, something that's just so subtle.
Well, one thing, like the slow motion of him going to stab her and that breath alerting her and her turning literally where the knife within a centimeter of stabbing her and her turning around and stabbing him. Like that whole choreography, the cinematography, everything was awesome with that shot.
Yeah, I love this scene. So, Maddie tries to run through the house, but she quickly runs out of steam as her legs get weak and her vision gets blurry. While attempting to grab another knife out of the kitchen, she collapses in front of the sink. The killer then hobbles his way out onto the living area where he finds Maddie leaned up against the cabinets, obviously not looking too good. He then calls her a cunt and goes to finish her off, but before he can get too close, Maddie sprays him in the face with hornet spray. Now that his vision is fucked up, he is just like wildly swinging the knife all around when Maddie then grabs her super loud and bright smoke alarm from earlier and turns it on, pointing it right at him. And this shit fucks him up. He ends up dropping his knife and just stumbling throughout the living room as Maddie is just like following him around with it. She then drops it to pick up the knife, but right as she does this, the killer grabs her from behind and slams her on the floor. He then violently kicks her in the ribs before climbing on top of her to choke her. She is able to bite the fuck out of his hand, causing him to let go of her neck for a moment, and he quickly recovers though as he slaps the shit out of her and goes back to strangling her. And Maddie is in trouble here. She is almost out of energy. She can't get any air because he's choking her, and she only has seconds to figure something out. So she then begins to feel for like whatever is close by with her left hand, and while feeling around on the floor, she comes across a corkscrew, which I was like, hell yeah, because corkscrew kills are always good. But before she can grab it, he starts slamming her head into the ground, where she then tries sticking her finger in his shoulder wound, but he is like way too amped up to really feel it, and this causes him to squeeze even harder on her neck. We then see Maddie starting to fade as we begin to hear her heartbeat get slower and slower as she starts to see images of her loved ones and flashes of her life. And before her heart completely stops, she tries one last time for that corkscrew, and as she grabs it and jams it right into this fuckface's neck, and the look on his face is so satisfying. This is awesome because the corkscrew, because it was like so long, it goes through one side of his neck and like pops out the other side. So when she pulls it back out, we get two wounds that are just like spurting blood every time like his heart would beat. It's a good kill.
Yeah, clearly she got his jugular vein with that. This whole scene is awesome. I thought the strangulation was super brutal. Like, they do a really good job, like, when he's slamming her on the ground, and it's really long. Like, a
It is
lot of
long, yeah.
movies miss that. Like, it takes a long time to strangle somebody to death. It's not quick, and it's really drug out and, like, really kinda hard to watch at a point. And then with the stab through the neck, the practical effects with the fucking blood squirt every time his heart beats, loved it. Thought it was
Yeah.
awesome.
So the killer pretty quickly collapses on top of Maddie and it covers her face in his blood, which is dope because, bathe in the blood of your enemies. A very worn out Maddie then pushes his dead ass body off of her as she gasps for air. A very worn out Maddie then pushes his dead ass body off of her as she gasps for air. After catching her breath, she then searches his pockets for her phone, which she finds and dials 911. As the call starts, we see her just pass out from exhaustion and blood loss. A little while later, we see her get back up and walk out onto her porch, where she finally reunites with her cat. And as she is sitting there petting her, we see the blue lights of a cop car arrive as it pulls into her driveway. We then get a close-up of Maddie's bloody face, where she closes her eyes and smiles. And that is the end of Hush.
Yeah, I would have literally bashed his fucking brains in till they were literally sitting on the floor next to him before I turned my back. Even with the corkscrew, I would have found the closest blunt object and I wouldn't have stopped until just there was nothing left.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but at the same time, too, I think, she probably doesn't have a lot of energy left. I don't know if she could physically do it at this point.
I bet you she cleaned all those wounds before the police got there, though. She's very, very medically inclined.
All right, so I got a couple facts we'll run through real quick. So, the blurb on the back of the book Maddie wrote references some details of the real-life Netflix series Midnight Mass, such as the main location, which is the isolated Crockett Island, the main protagonist, Riley, and the church that is mentioned. Also, the main female protagonist of the series, Erin, who is mentioned by Sarah when she is talking to Maddie about how much she loved the characters Riley and Erin.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You can put a future Easter egg. Like when Hush came out, none of that existed.
No. Not even, it wasn't even close.
Yeah. So he had obviously either started having plans for that or, on his third of his 5 series decided to use some of that. But I know that was a tie-in from a Stephen King story too. So I don't know. Props to him, man. The dude can fucking write stories.
Yeah. So there is a quick shot of several books that the main character owns. Among them is Stephen King novels Revival, Under the Dome, and most noticeably, Mr. Mercedes. So a lot of Stephen King kind of little Easter eggs there.
Yeah, well, remember too, he said he stayed in that room that Stephen King that got the idea for The Shining in, and he said it was full of Stephen King books.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That was right before they went to shoot this movie. So obviously, Stephen King is a big inspiration of his. He literally goes through the same process that Stephen King did writing The Shining right before he goes to film.
The film has been remade twice in India, both released in the same year of 2019. And the reason that they made 2 of them the same year is because that they are both in 2 different languages in order to accommodate the different language speakers in India. It's interesting. Like, I wonder when they remade them, did they use different sets, different actors? Is it the same actors doing a different language?
Probably.
It's interesting.
Probably different actors, I would imagine, with being that fluent in a whole nother language to shoot a movie and read a script. And although there's not a whole lot of dialogue, obviously enough for them to redo an entire separate movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Katie Siegel and Mike Flanagan previously worked together on Oculus in 2013. I believe that this is where they first met. Then, while on a dinner date in 2014, they conceived the storyline for Hush, which was then released the same year that they got married, which is 2016. And I truly hope they live happily ever after because I love them both. They're awesome.
Yeah, so interesting thing with that, they kind of had they had the producers sign on board, but a big roadblock in getting this made was all of the producers were worried. Like, we don't want to put all this money up for you to make this movie and you make it with your girlfriend or fiance. They're like, what happens if y'all break up in the middle of the movie? If y'all get in some type of fight, like, we can't put all this money up. And so they essentially wanted to make the movie, but not with her as the lead because of their relationship. But he was like, no, he's like, this is our thing. We literally came up with this together. We've been working on this. This is like our baby. It has to be her. And they eventually got it greenlit.
That's interesting. All right, so ratings and kill count. Pretty low kill count, but for the story it makes sense. Total kills 3. We have Sarah, who got stabbed a bunch of times. You have John, who got stabbed in the neck, and the killer, who was also stabbed in the neck with a corkscrew. Favorite kill? You're up first.
My best kill was the motherfucker, for obvious reasons, because he's a bastard. But on top of that, the blood pumping out of his neck with the corkscrew wound we just talked about is fucking awesome. My second would be Sarah. Hers was absolutely brutal, but also the context of the scene. That's when you really realize what direction this movie's going. That's when you realize, like, holy shit, her being deaf, this is going to be bad for her. Interesting. So I guess the end of the movie, the killer was supposed to die in a different way. They always planned on there being a fire in the house at the end, and that's how he dies. And they ended up, when they were looking for a house to film in, I don't know if it was a friend of theirs or a guy who worked on the movie, but it was his mom. And he said, my mom's got a house. It'd be like the perfect location. And they went there. But the only downside to that, they're like, everything was perfect, but we couldn't set the house on fire.
I was going to say, like, you can't just set that house on fire.
So they rewrote the whole ending with the killer dying, and I loved it. It was great.
I like the rewritten ending. Yeah. I wouldn't want to do the fire.
Yeah, I don't know what all the details with the fire was, but that was the only change they had to make due to filming when they finally did find the location, and I loved it. That was great.
My favorite kills, they're exactly the same for the exact same reasons. So don't need to go over that. All right, rating.
My rating is a 4.5. I thought this was an awesome display of psychological horror. It has some great kills. It's technically a slasher, but the psychological aspect makes it like legitimately scary when you put yourself in her shoes. I think it's a very unique concept. Far from Flanagan's normal work, as there's very little story to go on, but he makes so much out of such a simple concept. One of the few movies as a slasher fan that you don't root for the killer. And I think that's a testament to the writing and the acting. The actors were amazing. There's really 2 main actors in this movie that plays Maddie and the killer, and they were both fucking fantastic. Yeah. The cat and mouse, the back and forth with them, I thought it was great. Thought it was amazing. Kills were awesome. The effects that we did get were great. The audio is a huge part of this movie. I think the audio, if you put different audio to this movie, or they shot it in a different way where they didn't show her perspective, it'd have been a much different movie. It made it much scarier. Overall, I think it's a fucking awesome movie.
I gave it a 4, man. I love the uniqueness of the story. Like, we've had many slashers with Final Girls, but I can't really think of off the top of my head a Final Girl that has like multiple disabilities. So I really like the uniqueness with that. The thought of being in a situation where the house is dark, there are no phones, no internet, you can't call for help, no neighbors, and someone is trying to, kill you is terrifying. And the fact that you wouldn't be able to hear, it makes it a lot more scarier. So, I think I've probably talked about it on the show before. I'm not really a huge fan of movies with limited or no dialogue, but every now and then it's done like really, really well and it catches my attention. And I also really like the cinematography and the fact that it wasn't shot on a set. Like they used a real house. I love when they do that kind of stuff. But, I agree. I think the thing that really pushes the movie forward is the sound design. Like, if you're not gonna have dialogue, or at least a lot of dialogue, you gotta have something else to the table. And sound design is the something else in this. That it draws you, it pulls you into the movie, the story.
Yeah, and with a character that's deaf, that's a key element of the movie, and I thought they did great with that.
Yeah, I definitely think that the acting, the uniqueness of the story and the sound design is like it's the foundation of this really good movie. So yeah, that is my rating. So that is going to be our opinion on Mike Flanagan's Hush. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the websites, check out the socials, tell a friend, a family member, or a badass final girl about the show, and we hope to see you next time.
So I know that you didn't check this out, so this is for you as well, but definitely if you're a fan of this movie, check out the 4K restoration that Scream Factory put out. I know you mentioned cinematography briefly.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you see it on the 4K scan of the original negatives, it looks fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I got to check that out. I actually wrote the episode off of Tubi.
Yeah, I figured I knew you didn't have my copy, so I figured that's why I didn't talk about it too much. But the 4K restoration, like in the woods too, it's beautifully shot movie.
All right, well, we will catch you next time.